Sometimes a pinfall or a submission simply isn't sufficient to establish true wrestling dominance. Sometimes the only way you can stand tall over your opponent is to stand 6 feet above them. When did professional wrestlers opt to settle a grudge the same way a decorator paints the ceiling? Let's look at the origins, the reimaginations, and the recklessness of one of sports entertainment's most iconic gimmicks. My name is Tom Campbell from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is the history of the ladder match. Join us. The roots of the rumbles up the rungs can be found in Canada. Clever bunch, the Canadians. James Naismith of Ontario invented basketball whilst working as a PE instructor in Massachusetts. John Hops of Winnipeg invented the first pacemaker. And in 1940, Norman James Breakey of Manitoba revolutionized home decorating with the invention of the paint roller. Another piece of home hardware was put to use in Regina, Saskatchewan in 1972. Former Mr. Universe turned pro wrestler Dan Crawford had a wild idea to spice up his matches. In an interview with the Cochrane Times, Crawford let us into his mind palace. The idea was to challenge a guy to get in the ring. I would hang a bag of money from the light and put a ladder outside. I would say he'd have to fight me, get the ladder, climb up, and get the money. You hung it like a bone for a dog. Crawford believed the greed of the bad guy would be their hubris. So keen to scramble up the ladder and make a quick buck, they take their eye off the opponent and get knocked to the canvas from an almighty height. On October the 5th, 1972, Crawford put his unorthodox concept to the test when he battled rival Cultaholic in the first ever ladder match in pro wrestling history. They'd exchanged the Stampede North American Championship back and forth in the months leading up to this showdown, but by the time the history-making match took place, neither man was champion, so it was all about the money. It was an awe-inspiring affair. When Cultaholic made a rush for the cash, Dan Crawford, with no regard for his own well-being, drop-kicked Tor and the ladder to stop him. When Tor hit the ground, wrestling was never the same again. Those first ladder matches were watched very carefully by one of Stampede's most intriguing imports, World of Sport star Kendo Nagasaki. Saturday afternoon wrestling in the United Kingdom was must-watch. Heck, even the Queen binned off her royal duties and took her phone off the hook to watch Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks go to war. Stampede kept one eye on the UK scene for talent that would fit what they did, such as the Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy Smith, and the mysterious Kendo Nagasaki, who became a multi-time North American champion. When Kendo returned from his great Canadian adventure, he brought Dan Crawford's match concept back with him. One of the more iconic ladder-based encounters on UK soil at this time occurred around Christmas of 1985 at the Hippodrome in London. Kendo Nagasaki, with the ever-loyal George Gillette in his corner, faced Iron Fist Clive Myers. Above the ring, not a championship belt or a bag of money, but a solid gold vinyl LP. It was billed as a disco ladder match, and dramatic music played whilst they fought, with the arena lights flashing gold. Because it was the holidays, we had some songs from Home Alone in there, and a ladder wrapped in tinsel. 10 out of 10 for presentation, despite the fact that you'll probably find it on a list of 10 matches that will give you a migraine somewhere. America got a sniff of ladder match action in the early 80s, courtesy of Vern Gagne's AWA. Canada's strongest man, Dino Bravo, was embroiled in a feud with Crusher Jerry Blackwell. Fun fact, Blackwell was also nicknamed the Mountain from Stone Mountain and the Rattlesnake, beating Steve Austin by well over a decade. He and Dino Bravo were beefy boys, so the idea of the ladder match being a go-to in their feud seems bizarre by today's standards, but throughout 19 1980, they wowed audiences by hanging $5,000 above the ring and racing each other to the top to get it. He'd bring the match back in the late 80s during his feud with Colonel De Beers, would Jerry Blackwell. He got the win, but De Beers and Super Ninja shocked audiences by, get this, using the ladder as a weapon to beat Jerry Blackwell senseless before stealing the money. Disgusting behavior. From the AWA to the NWA, Dusty Rhodes, who had a penchant for gimmick wrestling matches, put the rungs in the ring for the matches that he had with Jimmy Garvin as part of Championship Wrestling from Florida. Ever want to innovate with violence? The man who gave us the War Games put his own gory touch on the ladder match on the Great American Bash Tour in 1987. Not content with a ladder match for $100,000, the ropes were wrapped in barbed wire. After 7 or so minutes of bumps and blood, Dusty knocked opponent Tully Blanchard off the ladder with an inelegant dropkick. He punched him with a coal miner's glove and grabbed the big bag of money to win his first and last lights out barbed wire $100,000 ladder match. Doesn't it roll off the tongue? He'd do 2 more bits of ladder-based business in his storied career with Dusty Rhodes, his last being against Brian Lawler in NWA TNA in 2003. You can seek it out if you want. Back in Canada, Crawford's signature match was gifted to second-generation wrestling standout Bret Hart, who you may have heard of. The Hitman in training stepped up the stepladder SmackDowns against guys like Bad News Allen and Dynamite Kid. Bret even beat fellow Canadians Edge and Christian to the punch, teaming with Dynamite to face Bad News Allen and KY Wakamatsu in the world's first tag team ladder match. Bret was literally and metaphorically climbing the ladder as the rock and wrestling era was getting the party started, courtesy of the World Wrestling Federation and Hulkamania. Bret Hart would soon find his way from the Great White North to Titan Towers alongside his brother-in-law Jim the Anvil Neidhart. When they stampeded into the WWF Tag Teams division, Bret was almost immediately considered a future single star. When Bret broke away from the doubles division and became Intercontinental Champion, he bent the ear of Vince McMahon. Not literally, don't be silly. He wouldn't do that until November 1997. Vince initially wasn't sold on the idea, but the Hitman kept hitting him with it. Not literally, don't be silly, he wouldn't blah-de-blah-de-blah 1997. A few months after that first conversation, Vince acquiesced, and on July the 21st, 1992, Bret Hart faced Shawn Michaels in the World Wrestling Federation's first ever ladder match, predating Michaels' show-stealing WrestleMania 10 moment with Razor Ramon by nearly 2 years. This did, however, give Ramon and Michaels something to work off ahead of the aforementioned history-making WrestleMania 10 ladder match at Madison Square Garden. This was a match that they had dress rehearsed on the house show loop in the run-up to Mania, trying out spots, getting their metaphorical sea legs. And what makes their match at WrestleMania so great is that it was essentially the greatest hits from their off-camera ladder collisions. Halfway through that now famous match, the ladder bent and buckled, and it gradually dawns on everybody involved that this is the only ladder we have. If this breaks, then we're scuppered. A problem that was rectified by WWE bringing in about 234 ladders to each ladder match in years to come. It wasn't just the ladder that Michaels and Ramon nearly ruined, but the timing of WrestleMania itself. They went too long, and the matches that followed them had to be cut short and, in one case, cut from the card altogether. I mean, it was worth it though. It was a banger of a match. When SummerSlam 1995 rolled around, Shawn and Razor were challenged with raising the bar whilst climbing the bars. However, there was a major issue they had to work around for their hotly anticipated rematch. The World Wrestling Federation were feeling the heat from numerous TV and advertising bodies and had to implement a new violence code. This prohibited the use of weapons in wrestling matches. Shawn and Razor were told to have a ladder match, but without using the ladder as a weapon. They stayed up until the early hours of the morning before the pay-per-view, trying to flesh out a match that could rival their WrestleMania night out, but honor McMahon's wishes to not attack with the apparatus. Whilst they couldn't use it as a battering ram or a ball buster, they could still use it as a springboard. So with this and the appearance of a second ladder, they were able to steal the show once again. Now, a few months before Shawn and Razor had their risk-free rung-climbing effort, the first ladder match in Japan had taken place. New Japan Pro Wrestling have forever shied away from gimmick matches. They didn't get in on ladder match action until 2007, but IWA Japan gave the audience in the East absolute ladder carnage in 1994 with the Crypt Keeper, a deathmatch wrestler who competed in a Crypt Keeper's mask, and Shoji Nakamaki in a barbed wire ladder death match. The history books will question this match's place in the grand order of things, as it was pinfall or submission to win, but the only weapon in play was a ladder wrapped in barbed wire. I think this match, whilst unconventional, should be counted as a sort of weird half-uncle of the ladder match. One that maybe turns up at Christmas and you struggle to make conversation with. He probably owns a petrol station or an accountancy firm. You know the type. The general rules of the ladder match have been to incapacitate your opponent enough so you can ascend the aluminium or aluminum if you're wrong and claim the prize hanging above. As we've discussed here today, the earliest reward for the King of the Rungs was a laundry bag full of money. Championship titles have become the main accolade for ladder match participants, but promoters have strayed from such ideas over the years and had wrestlers fighting for contracts for title opportunities, upgraded to a briefcase by WWE. More on that later. From there, you've got more offbeat offerings such as a taser, which Goldberg and Scott Hall fought over at Sold Out in WCW, a set of steel cage door keys, which Mr. Anderson and Kurt Angle battled for in Impact in 2010, Kurt Angle's gold medals, which have been placed above the ring at least twice in Kurt's career, which he must be livid about, a reindeer's head with whoever claimed it making the loser wear it in, you guessed it, TNA, a poker chip and a literal brass ring in AEW, a recording contract in WCW, and a ceramic duck that the Filthy Animals and the Boogie Nights fought over on WCW Nitro. Vince Russo has struck again. ECW also elected to hang weapons above the ring, usually a kendo stick or something wrapped in barbed wire like a masochistic Christmas present, with their iteration of the ladder battle, the Stairway to Hell match. This one doesn't end when you get the weapon from above the ring. No. The match carries on. You can just use the weapon to your heart's content and then win by pinfall or tap out. Just Incredible has won 3 out of 5 Stairway to Hell matches, which I guess makes him the king of the Stairway to Hell match. So good on him. Shout out to DDT Pro, who excel at the bizarre by holding multi-person ladder cluster fudges for buckets of beer, fine porcelain, a Sanshiro Takami Imari heirloom, may I add, and multiple bodies of body lotion across the years. Never stop DDT Proing, DDT Pro. WWF completed their Stampede catch-up by running their first ever tag team ladder match in October of 1999, and it put 4 young stars firmly on the map. WWE Hall of Famers Edge and Christian, plus multi-time, multi-promotion world champions the Hardy Boys, got their true kickstart from volleying themselves off multiple ridiculously high jet black ladders during a white-hot run for the World Wrestling Federation. Adding the Dudley Boys in 2000 resulted in a Mick Foley Wizard of Oz inspired promo that birthed tables and ladders and chairs. Oh my! Making the multi-man mayhem a frequent attraction at WWF shows. To give credit where it's due, in the summer of 2000, WCW had 3 Count, the Young Dragons, and the Filthy Animals following suit with mid-air stunt shows lighting up the mid-card in the dying days of World Championship Wrestling. Good on you, lads. Ladder matches were ultimately changed forever by one person. One person whose legendary WWE career gave him a vision that changed the ladder battle forever. I'm talking, of course, about Jeff Jarrett. When NWA TNA was born in the wake of WCW's demise, Jeff Jarrett wanted to shake up the ladder format. This gave us the Ultimate X match first, as Jeff Jarrett called on his podcast, the ladder match without a ladder. And after a few more hours of kicking around ideas with NWA Creative, they toyed with a ladder match where the winner was the one who would hang the title belt up, rather than the one that pulled it down. You had to pin one of the other participants in order to be eligible to do so, and if you were pinned, you spent 2 minutes in the penalty box. With that, the King of the Mountain was born, and more recently, the Queen of the Mountain. Of all the ways to redefine and reimagine the ladder match, this was, indeed, one of them. Of course, the ladder match offering in Stamford was forever changed by Chris Jericho and former WWE creative Brian Gewirtz. As WrestleMania 21 was approaching, there was a lot of talented superstars without a date for the dance. One of the earliest scrapped plans for this WrestleMania was a triple threat submission match between Y2J, Benoit, and Edge. But when Shelton Benjamin and Kane came round to play, they mixed it up even further. Whilst driving to a WWE show in Madison Square Garden, Jericho mooted the idea of a ladder match featuring himself, Benoit, Kane, Edge, and Benjamin, with the winner getting a WWE title match the following night on Raw. This got upgraded to a title match whenever the opportunistic winner desired. Now, the original plan was for the Lucky Ladder Lads to fight for a contract hanging above the ring. But nobody in creative was really feeling the aesthetic of these guys all scrapping for a scrap of paper. Vince McMahon was the one who made the call to put the contract inside a briefcase and suspend that above the ring instead. The winner, who held the Halliburton, would have a guaranteed title match, which is what led Brian Gewirtz to coin the name Money in the Bank. The rest is history in the book. It's gone by many other names over the years. Ring of Honor would call them Ladder Wars. TNA may call them Full Metal Mayhem. AEW called it on one occasion Escalada de la Muerte, the Ladder of Death. But whatever you call it, and whatever the punished protagonists are punching up for, the breathtaking bizarreness of the ladder match has seen a slow but steady climb, en route to becoming a major part of the professional wrestling timeline. Almost too slow and steady. Like, seriously, why do people in ladder matches climb so slowly? If your decorator got up a ladder at a wrestler's pace, you'd sack him. I'm just saying. I'm Tom Campbell from Cultaholic.com. Stay safe and love you, bye.